Edmund Blunden was unusual among frontline officers in that he was never injured in the war, despite spending ample time at the front engaging in dangerous activities. Thus, except when he was sent off for a course of study or on leave, he was with his unit through nearly the entire war, an old-timer even though at the end of the war he was just 21. Blunden was a student at Christ Hospital, a boarding school founded as a charitable educational institution, but catering to the sons of the top social class in Britain. When the war started, he was still in school, and thus couldn't immediately volunteer for service. However, he did join the Army as soon as he graduated, and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Royal Sussex Regiment. During the war, he was promoted twice, being made captain at age 20. He received military honors for bravery, including the Military Cross. He survived the war and lived to be 77 years old. We've already talked about how the blank affect of Undertones of War reflects Blunden's shell shock. Although he was never officially diagnosed with shell shock, some of the events in Undertones, such as his being sent to a study course in England in 1918, were because his commander recognized the signs of shell shock. While it was lucky for Blunden that he was never injured in the war, that strange circumstance also means that he wasn't regularly taken out of the line to heal from wounds or illnesses, which for many soldiers was the primary way to get real rest that helped to prevent shell shock, and in some cases offered the chance for the soldiers to be seen by doctors who could diagnose the condition and send the soldier off for treatment. After the war, Blunden's friends, including Sassoon, recognized Blunden's psychological damage from the war and raised money to send him on a boat trip to South America, which I suppose is better than no treatment at all for his condition. People who knew him well said that he suffered all his life from his experience in the Great War. The first half of Undertones of War takes young Blunden into his first trench service and sees him getting to know his fellow soldiers, learn about Army life, and become familiar with the landscape of the war. In the second half, Blunden's unit serves in some of the worst battles of the war, and we see him speaking more sharply about the differences between what staff officers, who wear red tabs on their uniforms and are never stationed in the front lines, demand from soldiers, and what soldiers can bear. As before, Blunden is going through his experiences in chronological order, using a diary he kept in the war to remind him of where he was at any given time and what was happening there. We hear about his battalion being in dangerous trenches for longer than normal, about their exhausted removal to rest, about their immediate return to nerve-wracking battle lines, about ludicrous demands for attacks across impossible territory. Blunden, who describes himself as older now, has fully abandoned any thoughts he once had about the nobility of warfare and now largely sees it as a waste. For instance, Blunden recounts an order for his battalion to clear a German strongpoint near the Schwaben redoubt. He writes, "I received this information with distaste, and Harrison seemed at first to think it applied specially to me as odd job man. Then he changed his mind and sent James Castles and Sergeant Stickland out with a fighting patrol that night. If this failed, it was intended that I should try my hand the night after. As soon as Castles and his men moved, they were bombed and fusilladed, whereupon they lay down in confusion round the inconvenient saphead, and by the grace of God, suddenly 2 of the enemy from another direction wandered among them and surrendered. These prisoners, duly arrived at battalion headquarters, seemingly half expecting to be eaten alive, a milkman and an elementary schoolmaster, most welcome guests. The back areas were so well pleased with these samples that they accepted the perfectly sound report of Castles, finding the enemy's post too thickly wired and resolutely held for any but a carefully studied assault." This is rather typical of the way Blunden discusses faulty military strategy from staff officers who have no idea what the conditions at the front really are. The hastily contrived plan, the ambitious objective with no intelligence to recommend it, The abrupt change of plan on getting two prisoners who, in Blunden's description, must surely be two of the least threatening members of the German army. Blunden's battalion spent a great deal of time at Ypres, participating in the Third Battle of Ypres, also called Passchendaele. You will recognize some of the places Blunden mentions from your reading of the Wipers' Times, things like the ramparts, the Menin Road, the Cloth Hall, and Cathedral. Passchendaele was one of the worst battles of the First World War. As you can tell from Blunden's account, Ypres itself was so well bombed that there were few minimally safe locations for the troops to stay. Blunden remarks on the rain. This area of Flanders is low-lying, and its ancient drainage system had been destroyed by constant bombing, so that the battlefield was a morass of mud. Blunden remarks on seeing soldiers up to their armpits in mud, with their comrades unable to do anything to help them. The mud was too thick to allow its victims to be rescued. In Ypres, the Germans had high ground, so that British attacks had to happen uphill toward defenders who could clearly see them coming, with well-aimed artillery guns firing high-explosive shells at them the whole time. Blunden remarks that conditions grew so bad that Harrison, the colonel in charge of the regiment, habitually carried a resignation letter in his pocket. When pushed too far by the general, Harrison produced the letter, which the general refused to accept. But Blunden remarks, "The background of such humors was a filthy, limb-strewn, and most lonely world's end, where a Pickard's village had been, and where still a foundation of bricks, or the stump of an apple tree, or even a leaf or two of ivy might be found, at your own risk." Let's think about the juxtaposition for a moment. Blunden has described Harrison as soldierly and diligent. He is not one to overreact. We see him calmly sitting through shelling early on, for example. Here, the situation is dire enough that he is willing to resign his commission. Whatever is happening to make Harrison feel that he must resign rather than follow this particular order, it must be a pretty big deal, right? But Blunden's comment is about how grim the landscape is where the battalion is located, buttressed by the comment that there is still a little nature there, but retrieving some sign of it would be dangerous. This is typical of Blunden's understatement throughout the memoir. Where does this come from? Partly, it is the result of the British upper-class sense that one shouldn't display strong emotions of any kind. Compare this description of a hazardous crossing from one trench to another, in the open, with German munitions falling around him and a colleague. The greensward, suited by nature for the raising of sheep, was all holes, and new ones appeared with great uproar as one crossed. A German battery at close range made beautiful gropes around Kinward and myself one day, and the interested faces looking on from Stafford Trench had the pleasure of seeing us refuse to quicken our pace. As we expected to receive the next salvo on our persons, we felt that running would be a little tedious. Like the episode earlier in the book, when Blunden has to shovel a comrade into a sandbag after a shell landed on him seconds after Blunden had passed by, the episode where Blunden finds his comrade's eyeball under the duckboards, an incident that Barker borrows for Billy Pryor's worst memory. The emotional weight the event must have had does not match the matter-of-fact way Blunden narrates it. Of course, besides the usual British sang-froid, we are seeing here another example of the flat affect of the shell-shocked soldier. Your discussion work this week is going to give you the opportunity to think about issues of style and tone in Blunden's memoir. This work not only will help you to understand Blunden's work thoroughly, but also will prepare you for your formal essay, which is coming up a little later in the semester. In that formal essay, you will be analyzing one of the pieces of literature we are reading this semester, performing close readings of the text, and offering an argument about some significant aspect of war writing that interests you.